I thought he was just a friendly neighbor. Chapter 1. The man everyone trusted. The police report would later describe the case in just 11 words. The suspect lived across the street from every victim. What it didn't mention was that every victim had trusted him. Some gave him spare keys. Some asked him to feed their pets while they were away. Some invited him to birthday parties, family dinners, and Christmas celebrations. One elderly woman even called him the son I never had. No one ever imagined that the same man who shoveled snow from their driveways before sunrise was quietly studying every detail of their lives. By the time the truth surfaced, half the neighborhood had already been manipulated, and some people had simply disappeared. 3 months earlier, a cool autumn breeze swept through Blackwood Heights as Naomi Vale parked her silver hatchback in front of a new home. She stepped out and looked around. The neighborhood looked almost unreal. Rows of beautiful houses stood beneath towering maple trees. Children chased each other through perfectly trimmed front lawns. Wind chimes gently swayed on front porches. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked happily. It was the kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. Exactly the kind of place Naomi desperately needed. At 27, she was trying to rebuild her life. After losing her father to cancer the previous year and ending a 6-year relationship only months later, she wanted distance from painful memories. She wanted silence, a fresh beginning. She believed she had finally found one. She couldn't have been more wrong. As she struggled to lift a heavy box labeled art supplies, someone quietly stepped beside her. "Careful," a calm voice said. "Those look heavier than they seem." Naomi turned. Standing a few feet away was a man dressed in a charcoal sweater and dark jeans. He looked to be in his late 30s. Neatly combed black hair, clean-shaven, perfect posture. His smile was warm, almost rehearsed. "My name's Silas Beckett," he said, extending his hand. "I live right across the street." His handshake was firm but gentle, not intimidating, comforting. Without waiting for permission, he picked up the largest moving box as if it weighed nothing. "You've got excellent timing," he said with a soft laugh. "The house has been empty for almost a year." Naomi smiled politely. "I guess I got lucky." Silas looked at the house for a moment before replying. "I hope it brings you peace." There was something strange about the way he said it, as though he already knew she needed it. Inside the house, Silas placed every box exactly where Naomi intended to unpack it. "The kitchen things belong here. The books go upstairs. The bedroom boxes probably stay on the left." Naomi blinked. "I never told you which room was mine." Silas paused for barely a second, then smiled. "Lucky guess." She laughed awkwardly. It seemed like such a small thing, too small to question. Before leaving, Silas handed her a woven basket. Inside were homemade cinnamon cookies, premium coffee beans, a scented candle, and a handwritten note. "Welcome to Blackwood Heights. If you ever need anything, I'm only across the street." Everything about him felt thoughtful, almost impossibly thoughtful. Over the following weeks, Silas became a constant presence in Naomi's new life. When her car battery died one rainy morning, Silas was already walking toward her with jumper cables. When a package was delivered while she was away, he had safely placed it inside her garage. When a storm knocked over part of her backyard fence, he arrived with tools before she even called a repair company. Every time she thanked him, he simply smiled. That's what neighbors do. Everyone in Blackwood Heights loved Silas. The elderly praised his kindness. Parents trusted him to watch their children. Teenagers waved whenever he drove past. Even the local mail carrier joked that Silas knew everyone's schedule better than the post office. Whenever Naomi mentioned him, people always said the exact same sentence. "You're lucky to have Silas living across from you." No one ever said a bad word about him. Not one. But perfection is sometimes the first warning sign. Late one evening, Naomi returned home after dinner with an old college friend. The house was quiet, exactly as she'd left it. She locked the front door, climbed the stairs, and walked into her bedroom. Then she stopped. Her sketchbook was lying open on her desk. She distinctly remembered placing it inside the bottom drawer before leaving. The latest drawing, a charcoal portrait she hadn't finished, had a single new line across the page. A line she didn't remember drawing. She frowned. Maybe she had forgotten. It had been a long day. Trying to ignore the uneasy feeling in her stomach, she closed the sketchbook and went to bed. At exactly 2:17 a.m., Naomi's eyes snapped open. She wasn't sure what had awakened her. The room was completely silent, yet she had the overwhelming sensation that someone had just been standing beside her bed, watching her sleep. She quickly switched on the bedside lamp. Nothing. She checked the closet. Empty. She searched the hallway. No one. Feeling foolish, she looked through the bedroom window. Across the street, Silas Beckett stood on his front porch. He wasn't looking at the stars. He wasn't checking the weather. He was looking directly at her window, as if he'd been expecting her to wake up. Then, slowly, he smiled, and raised one hand in a quiet wave. Naomi hesitated before nervously waving back. She closed the curtains immediately afterward. For the first time since moving to Blackwood Heights, her new house didn't feel like home. It felt like a place where someone else already knew every room. End of chapter. Final chapter. The house that was never empty. Rain hammered against the windows of the abandoned Beckett house. Lightning flashed across Blackwood Heights. Every home on the street had gone dark after the power mysteriously failed. The neighborhood was silent, except for Naomi's footsteps. She tightened her grip on the flashlight as Detective Felix Grant Forst opened the basement door. A cold gust of air escaped from below. It smelled of damp concrete, and something far worse. Rot. Felix looked at Naomi. "If you're wrong, this ends tonight." Naomi swallowed. "I know. If I'm right." She couldn't finish the sentence. They descended into the darkness. The basement was larger than the entire house above it. Rows of metal shelves stretched into the shadows. Thousands of folders were stacked with military precision. Every folder carried a name. Every resident. Every visitor. Every delivery driver who had entered Blackwood Heights during the last 22 years. Each file contained photographs, medical records, bank statements, voice recordings, personal letters, even diary entries. Naomi opened her own folder. Her hands began shaking. The first photograph wasn't taken after she moved in. It was taken 18 months earlier. She was standing outside the hospital where her father was receiving chemotherapy. Another photo showed her crying at his funeral. Another captured her leaving the apartment she had shared with her ex-boyfriend. Every tragedy, every private moment. Someone had been watching her long before she ever heard the name Silas Beckett. She whispered, He chose me. Felix slowly nodded. No. He built your entire future. Suddenly, a projector switched on by itself. Static crackled across an old white wall. Then a video began playing. Silas appeared on the screen, calm, smiling, wearing the same charcoal sweater he always wore. If you're watching this, congratulations. You've finally found my real home. Naomi felt her heartbeat quicken. Silas continued speaking as if he were standing in the room. People always ask the wrong question. They ask why. They should ask, how long? The screen changed. Black and white security footage. Year: 1998. A young Silas welcomed a family to the neighborhood. The father smiled. The mother laughed. 3 years later, their marriage collapsed. The father disappeared. Another recording. Year: 2004. A teenage boy was arrested for assaulting his best friend. Silas had anonymously planted false evidence that destroyed their friendship. Another recording. Year: 2012. A woman took her own life after believing her husband had been unfaithful. The affair had never happened. Silas had forged emails, printed fake photographs, made anonymous phone calls. He never attacked people directly. He destroyed trust. He let fear finish the job. The projector displayed one final sentence. People don't need monsters. They create them themselves. Felix whispered, "My God." Naomi stared at another cabinet. It was labeled, "Future Residents." Inside were files belonging to people who had not yet moved into Blackwood Heights. Applications, house listings, employment records, psychological evaluations. Silas had been selecting his future victims years in advance, including Naomi. She found a note clipped to her file. Subject displays unresolved grief after father's illness. Recently separated. High empathy. Most likely to trust kindness. Excellent candidate. Naomi felt sick. Her entire move had never been a coincidence. Then, the basement lights came on. Every single one. A slow clap echoed through the room. Clap, clap, clap. Silas stepped from the darkness. Perfectly calm. Perfectly dressed. Not a drop of rain on him. He smiled warmly. You weren't supposed to find this room until next year. Felix immediately drew his weapon. Don't move. Silas looked almost disappointed. You still think this ends with handcuffs? He laughed softly. I've already won. Police sirens echoed outside. Felix pressed his radio. No response. Dead. Silas calmly pulled a remote control from his pocket. He pressed one button. Every television in every house across Blackwood Heights turned on simultaneously. Every phone. Every laptop. Every smart device. The entire neighborhood watched the basement live. Silas smiled at the hidden cameras. Good evening, everyone. You've trusted me for 22 years. I fixed your roofs. I watched your children. I attended your weddings. I buried your parents. And not once did any of you wonder how I always arrived exactly when you needed me. Silence filled the room. Then he spoke the sentence that chilled Naomi to her core. I wasn't your neighbor. I was your author. I wrote every chapter of your lives. The neighbors began arriving outside. Confused. Terrified. They watched the live stream from their phones. One by one, they realized their secrets were being exposed. Hidden affairs, financial ruin, anonymous letters, destroyed friendships. Every tragedy had one invisible hand behind it. Silas Beckett, the man they had loved. Felix stepped closer. "It's over." Silas smiled. "No." He pointed toward Naomi. "Ask her." Felix frowned. Silas looked directly into Naomi's eyes. "What was your father's final sentence before he died?" Naomi's blood ran cold. She had never told anyone. Never. Silas whispered it perfectly. Word for word. Tears filled Naomi's eyes. "How?" Silas smiled sadly. "I was in the hospital. I sat beside you. You thanked me. You just didn't remember my face." Naomi's entire body froze. Memories flashed. A stranger bringing coffee. A man helping visitors find elevators. Someone comforting families. Always smiling. Always invisible. Silas hadn't entered her life 3 months ago. He had entered it years ago. He had simply waited until she was vulnerable enough to notice him. Police surrounded the house. SWAT teams stormed inside. Felix looked away for 1 second. 1 second. When he looked back, Silas was gone. The basement door remained closed. Every exit was covered. There was nowhere to run. Yet he had vanished. Only one thing remained. A small cassette tape. Naomi pressed play. Silas's voice filled the room. "If you're hearing this, I'm already living somewhere else. Across another street. Watching another family. Waiting for another lonely person to mistake me for a friendly neighbor." Epilogue. 8 months later. Naomi had moved to another state. She never unpacked all her boxes. She never stayed anywhere long. Trust had become impossible. One autumn afternoon, she stopped at a quiet cafe in a town hundreds of miles away. Outside the window, a moving truck parked in front of a beautiful suburban home. A young woman stepped out, smiling nervously as she admired her new neighborhood. Across the street, a man walked toward her carrying a welcome basket. Naomi couldn't see his face clearly, only his calm posture, his gentle wave. The woman smiled back. The man reached out to shake her hand. As the wind shifted, Naomi heard his voice drift across the street. "Hi, I'm your neighbor." Naomi dropped her coffee. The cup shattered across the floor. She ran outside. The street was empty. Only the welcome basket remained on the porch. Inside it was a handwritten note. "Welcome home. You're safe here." At the bottom, in neat black ink, was one final sentence. People never fear the stranger. They fear him only after they know his name. The end.